Most actors spend their careers searching for stability. One image, one type of role, one version of themselves that audiences will keep buying. Robert Pattinson did the opposite. He seemed destined to be trapped as a teen idol forever, remembered only as the glittering vampire from Twilight. For many, that would have been enough. Fame, fortune, an easy career built on the same heartthrob formula. But Pattinson wasn't interested in safety. From the start, he resisted Hollywood's demands. He refused to smile when executives told him to, argued that Edward Cullen should look tortured instead of charming, and nearly got fired for it. That stubborn streak would define everything that came next. Because instead of coasting on Twilight, Pattinson made a radical choice: to destroy the very image that made him famous. He starved himself, threw up on set, lived like a drifter, and risked ridicule in bizarre indie films, all to escape the trap of being predictable. In the process, he went from laughingstock to one of the most fascinating actors of his generation. This is how Robert Pattinson keeps destroying himself, and why that self-destruction has become his greatest weapon. Robert Pattinson's first brush with mainstream fame came not with Twilight, but with Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. As Cedric Diggory, he played the perfect Hogwarts champion: noble, handsome, effortlessly kind. On screen, Cedric was the type of character who seemed born to win, the all-American hero even though he was British. He had an earnest smile, brotherly chemistry with Daniel Radcliffe's Harry, and a selfless bravery that made his tragic fate hit even harder. For Pattinson, it was a small role, but it left a huge impression. But his real breakthrough came 2 years later, when Twilight exploded into a cultural phenomenon. Practically overnight, Pattinson went from unknown to global heartthrob, plastered on bedroom walls, magazine covers, and every corner of the internet. For most young actors, that would have been a dream. For Pattinson, it was a nightmare. He hated the way the role threatened to box him in. Even on set, he fought against the studio's attempts to make Edward Cullen lighter, more marketable. Executives reportedly told him to smile more or risk being replaced. He pushed back, insisting that Edward was not a charming teen idol, but a tortured soul. His brooding intensity was so extreme that the studio worried he'd ruin the film's appeal. Instead, it became the very thing that defined it. The quiet, monk-like seriousness he brought to Edward turned the vampire into a symbol of dangerous, obsessive love. His chemistry with Kristen Stewart worked precisely because both of them held back, letting silence and stillness build the tension. But as much as it fit the story, it also threatened to lock Pattinson's career into a single mold: the brooding romantic, forever frozen in time. The heartthrob trap was closing in, and to escape it, Pattinson would have to destroy the very image that had made him famous. After Twilight, Pattinson could have coasted forever as the face of a billion-dollar franchise. Instead, he made a choice few understood at the time: to destroy the very image that made him famous. His weapon wasn't scandal, but craft. He began searching for roles that forced him to shed every trace of the glittering vampire, and in doing so, he started reinventing himself through performance. Take David Cronenberg's Cosmopolis, 2012. The film confines Pattinson to the backseat of a limousine for nearly 2 hours. Stripped of action scenes and teenage romance, he had only his face, his voice, and his stillness to carry the film. Pattinson leaned into that restraint. He delivered lines in a flat, almost whispered monotone, as if bored by the world around him. His eyes rarely sparkled. Instead, they glazed over with corporate detachment, then suddenly twitched with flashes of paranoia. This controlled emptiness mirrored his character, Eric Packer, a billionaire drifting toward collapse. The same actor who once made audiences swoon with longing glances now made them shiver with alienation. Cronenberg later praised his ability to turn absence into presence, to make the void itself fascinating. Then came The Rover, 2014, which flipped everything again. Here, Pattinson played Ray, a stuttering, half-witted drifter in a bleak Australian wasteland. Gone was the icy tycoon. Instead, Pattinson shrank himself on screen. Hunched shoulders, darting eyes, lips trembling around every word. When Guy Pearce's character berates him, Ray flinches like a beaten dog, yet clings to him with desperate loyalty. What makes the performance remarkable are the micro shifts: a timid smile when shown kindness, a flicker of defiance when pushed too far. Pattinson built Ray out of nervous tics and hesitant pauses, embodying a man crushed by the world, but still aching to belong. The contrast between the two roles is striking. In Cosmopolis, Pattinson conveyed power hollowed out by emptiness. In The Rover, he conveyed weakness still clinging to scraps of humanity. One made him untouchable, the other pitiful, but in both, he disappeared so fully into character that the Twilight heartthrob seemed like a different person altogether. With these two roles, Pattinson proved he wasn't just breaking free from the heartthrob trap. He was dismantling it with precision. He no longer looked like a teen idol forced into darker films. He looked like an actor deliberately stripping himself bare, reinventing his craft piece by piece. And this was only the beginning, because soon Pattinson would take that transformation even further, pushing his body and mind to the edge of self-destruction. By the mid-2010s, Pattinson's transformation was already in motion. But with Good Time, 2017, High Life, 2018, and The Lighthouse, 2019, he went further than anyone expected, taking on characters so raw and punishing that the performances looked less like acting and more like self-destruction. In Good Time, directed by the Safdie brothers, Pattinson became Connie Nikas, a small-time criminal scrambling through one disastrous night in New York. To inhabit him, Pattinson shed 40 pounds, starving himself on tuna and porridge to physically embody Connie's jittery frame. Off-set, he wandered through corner delis in rough neighborhoods, trying to blend in unnoticed, so he could feel like a man who lived on the margins. On screen, the transformation is visceral. His body twitches with adrenaline, his voice races ahead of his thoughts, and every lie slips out so fast it feels rehearsed. One moment, Connie is slick and confident. The next, he's panicked and cornered, eyes darting like an animal in a trap. What makes the performance so gripping is that Pattinson never lets Connie become a cartoon crook. Every frantic gesture carries the weight of desperation. Every flash of charm is undercut by fear. The audience doesn't just watch Connie. They feel his collapse in real time. 2 years later, The Lighthouse pushed him to an even darker place. Acting opposite Willem Dafoe, Pattinson played Ephraim Winslow, a lighthouse keeper unraveling in isolation. Here his process was extreme. He forced himself to vomit between takes, even urinating on himself during scenes, to make the disgust and filth tangible. He spun until dizzy, staggered in genuine nausea, and muttered to himself in manic circles while cameras rolled. The result is feral, almost animalistic. His face contorts with rage, his eyes widen with paranoia. His entire body coils like a live wire about to snap. Every shot feels dangerous, as though Pattinson himself might break. That same year, he offered a very different kind of collapse in Claire Denise's High Life. As Monty, a prisoner on a doomed space mission, Pattinson stripped himself of energy instead of exploding with it. He sat still for long stretches, his face almost expressionless, as if life itself had drained out of him. The performance was monk-like, ascetic, built on pauses and silences. When Monty did erupt, flashes of anger, tenderness with the baby he cared for, it felt startling precisely because of the stillness surrounding it. Where Good Time in The Lighthouse showed destruction through frenzy, High Life revealed destruction through emptiness. A man erasing himself piece by piece until nothing human was left. The genius of these performances lies in their intensity. In Good Time, he weaponized nervous energy, stretching a single night into a relentless breakdown. In The Lighthouse, he surrendered to madness, letting his body deteriorate alongside his character's mind. And in High Life, he embraced silence and restraint, showing how even absence can be a form of annihilation. Together, these films proved that Pattinson was no longer just reinventing himself. He was willing to annihilate himself in every possible way for the sake of truth on screen. By the late 2010s, Pattinson had buried the image of the glittering vampire so deeply that even his harshest critics had to admit he was no longer the Twilight guy. Indie cinema had reshaped him into a risk-taking chameleon. But true redemption would come only when mainstream Hollywood once again trusted him with its biggest franchises. That moment arrived with Tenet, 2020, and The Batman, 2022. In Tenet, Christopher Nolan cast him as Neil, a suave and mysterious operative in a story of time inversion. The performance was a revelation not because it was extreme, but because it was deceptively light. After years of brooding intensity, Pattinson showed he could be charming, witty, and effortlessly cool. He moved with casual confidence, his disheveled elegance contrasting John David Washington's rigid focus. His delivery of quips felt unforced, giving the film a rare warmth amid its dense mechanics. Yet beneath the grin lingered a subtle melancholy, a suggestion that Neil carried secrets the audience could only glimpse. Pattinson balanced playfulness with gravitas, proving he could hold his own in a cerebral blockbuster without disappearing under its weight. Then came the Batman. For many, it was the ultimate test. Could Pattinson step into one of cinema's most iconic roles and make it his own? Director Matt Reeves envisioned a darker, more grounded take, a Batman closer to a haunted detective than a polished superhero. Pattinson embraced that vision completely. Behind the mask, his physicality was imposing, shoulders squared, gaze sharpened into menace. But out of costume, his Bruce Wayne was fragile, almost childlike in his grief. He spoke little, letting silence and posture convey isolation. Critics noted how he conveyed duality, the mythic figure striking fear in criminals, and the broken orphan still lost in mourning. What made both performances stand out is how they reframed Pattinson's earlier extremes. Where Good Time and the Lighthouse showcased chaos, Tenet and the Batman revealed control. He had mastered modulation, knowing when to unleash energy and when to hold back. Hollywood had once dismissed him as a liability, but now its most demanding directors trusted him to anchor billion-dollar projects. This was not just reinvention, it was vindication. Pattinson had destroyed the heartthrob image, survived the extremes of indie cinema, and returned to the mainstream not as a franchise puppet, but as one of the most respected actors of his generation. To outside observers, Robert Pattinson's career might look like a string of reckless choices, starving himself, vomiting on set, shrinking into pathetic drifters, or exploding into manic criminals. But underneath the chaos lies something far more deliberate. His self-destruction is not aimless. It's a method. Pattinson has often admitted he distrusts safety in acting. He avoids comfort zones because, to him, predictability is death on screen. That philosophy explains his relentless pattern. Choose roles that destabilize him, then surrender fully to the instability. Each character becomes a kind of experiment in pushing boundaries, not only of his own body, but of cinematic storytelling itself. His technique is surprisingly consistent across wildly different roles. He uses physical immersion, altering his body, weight, posture, even bodily functions, to align with his character's reality. Connie in Good Time twitches with nervous adrenaline because Pattinson himself was running on caffeine, exhaustion, and hunger. Winslow in The Lighthouse sinks into filth and madness because Pattinson literally lived it, spinning himself sick and muttering until he blurred the line between actor and character. But there's also emotional strategy at play. Pattinson excels at withholding. In Cosmopolis, he delivered lines with such flat detachment that every micro-expression became magnified. In The Rover, he let fear and longing seep out in tiny flickers. A hesitant smile, a glance quickly averted. He knows that silence, hesitation, or stillness can often communicate more than dialogue. And when the moment finally calls for release, an outburst of rage, a breakdown into tears, it feels earned, explosive, and unforgettable. This balance of restraint and eruption is the essence of his craft. Unlike method actors, who lose themselves entirely, Pattinson treats each performance as controlled demolition. He breaks down parts of himself on purpose, only to rebuild something unrecognizable for the role. That's why he can jump from indie extremes to blockbusters without losing authenticity. Directors have come to value this unpredictability. They know Pattinson will bring risk, but never laziness. He may destroy himself, but he does it with intention. And that intention transforms what could be chaos into something cinematic. Dangerous, yes, but precise. Behind the madness, Pattinson has built a method that ensures one thing: audiences will never see him the same way twice. Robert Pattinson has never been interested in playing it safe. He began as a heartthrob the world thought it understood, then dismantled that image piece by piece, through billionaires in limos, desperate criminals, men unraveling in lighthouses, and finally, a Batman unlike any before. What ties it all together is not fame or box office, but a willingness to destroy himself for the role. Pattinson doesn't protect his image. He shatters it, rebuilds it, and dares the audience to follow. And that truth is why audiences keep watching. Because when Pattinson is on screen, we never feel safe. Anything can happen. A twitch, a smile, a breakdown that feels like it might consume him for real. That danger is magnetic, and it's what makes him one of the most fascinating actors of his generation.